Welcome to the Nightlife Podcast. Have you ever dismissed a dream as just the pizza? Or your brain processing information while you sleep? More than we realize, our dreams are a goldmine of divine revelation hidden for us to discover, explaining deep mysteries in pictures and stories created for us by God. Once you realize this gift that has been yours all along, you'll never go back to spending the nightlife just sleeping. Wow, are these historic times as Terra4s are playing out on the world stage. I keep refilling my popcorn as the suspense builds, enthralled yet hopeful that this drama is unfolding toward a happy ending for everyone. Anyone who's watched a war movie with me knows I need a blanket ready to pull over my head for intense battle scenes, or, my favorite, a filtering app like VidAngel that allows me to choose what I see. Even though watching a movie on my couch is the polar opposite of actually being engaged in battle, I'm inspired and intrigued by all things military, as parallel to life's battles. Recently, I've been having a lot of military dreams, slightly different from standard warfare dreams in that they're much more detailed and strategic. I used to hate fighting dreams because I was usually being attacked, fighting for my life, and I would wake up exhausted. Over time, I started winning more, and today these are some of my favorite dreams because they're intriguing, yet generally peaceful. Paul encouraged us to fight the good fight of faith, and a good fight is a fight we win, right? God promises to always lead us in triumph in Christ, so the only way we can lose is if we quit. Sometimes we win as valiant and highly skilled warriors, and honestly just as often in a comedy of errors like Kung Fu Panda, stumbling toward victory. Have you ever considered how much battle imagery there is in the Bible? The Israelites were in constant conflict with enemies, and many heroes of the faith were actually celebrated military leaders, including Moses, Joshua, Gideon, King David. In the New Covenant, the emphasis on warfare shifts to the spiritual battle between God's kingdom and the enemies on earth, the epic tension between light and darkness that pervades our daily existence. 13 is a fitting number for today's episode, representing spiritual rebellion. The whole reason there is a battle to begin with is because of Satan's rebellion, toppling the first domino of sin and all the devastation that spread from there. Ephesians 6:12 says that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, and against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Heidi Baker, a missionary to Mozambique, once said, "You have no authority where you have no love." God has been deeply impressing this to me lately, as I've had warfare dreams where I end up taking my enemy into my arms as a mother would her child and sharing God's love with them. It's a powerful picture of how we can hate evil and at the same time love the person doing evil. If we can't understand God's love for who we would consider the worst of sinners, those who inflict unimaginable suffering on others, then we don't have a revelation of God's love, Jesus' sacrifice, or who our real enemy is. Emphasizing the spiritual nature of our battles, Paul teaches believers to put on the full armor of God so that we can take our stand against the devil's schemes. He also explains that the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Consider that every earthly military mission, position, strategy, and weapon serves as a metaphor for spiritual battle. There are distinct branches of military service depending on the terrain, enemy, and conflict. Think of the nature of various types of engagement, such as hand-to-hand combat, airstrikes, tunnel warfare, combat teams, special forces, covert or sniper operations, and specific types of weapons most effective for the situation. In a recent dream, I was in a utility elevator taking me underground in a secured concrete government building to be shown something. I expected a long ride and was surprised when the door opened just 5 levels down. I was shown a covert operation that our government was conducting against a certain class of our society, with the purpose of leveraging their influence to propagate evil. It's interesting I went down 5 floors, since 5 represents grace. Since grace is God's unmerited favor, the negative counterpart of God's grace is related to judgment, the just penalty for sin. So the strategy seemed to be to weaponize the influence of this people group to bring sin and judgment to our nation. The concrete building represented a stronghold of the enemy. Exposure of this psychological operation is a call to prayer and a revelation of God's will for those being manipulated to awaken and arise as the force God created them to be for good instead of evil. Not long after, I had a related dream of being on an elevator going up in a different concrete building. There was one floor that was especially guarded by strong military presence, and of course, that was the floor I went to. I had one item in my hand that gave me access to this floor. As the elevator door opened, I ran down a hallway, retrieved something specific, and then ran back to the elevator before the soldiers had opportunity to respond. I recovered the one thing I was after. Mission successful. Having a good idea of the meaning of what was in my hand, what I reclaimed from the enemy, and how it relates to the first dream, I'm praying into what I've seen. Also, this knowledge is most likely a special equipping for situations God has called me to. I'm so thankful for many instances where something I've seen in a dream is brought to my mind the moment I need it, bringing a new way of seeing something, wisdom, clarity, or strategy I would have otherwise lacked. Jesus said to his disciples, including us today, that he has given us authority over all the power of the enemy. The enemy does have power or ability, but no authority. The only authority he has is what we as humans give him, either through our agreement or ignorance. Just like our police and military are called to enforce the law in the face of criminal activity, we are called to exercise our spiritual authority through Jesus anytime the enemy is operating illegally in the spheres we are assigned to. One day, a friend told me God showed her what her spiritual weapon is. I was intrigued and asked God to show me if I have a specific weapon or specialty in spiritual warfare. That night, I had a vision of a large anti-aircraft gun. I took this to mean that I'm positioned on Earth to take down not just individual enemies, but to go after demonic principalities and power structures affecting large territories. In another gun dream, I was a sniper dressed in black in an abandoned concrete structure. Discovering that the enemy had detected my position, I ran back to my nearby hotel, trying to keep the enemy away from my family who didn't know I was a sniper. I was found, but didn't know if they knew I was the one they were after. I had on dark eyeliner, which made my eyes seem piercing as I stood face to face with my opponent, who was also dressed in all black. He spoke to me in Iranian, and all I understood from what he said was pain, knowing he was threatening me. I wasn't afraid, but calm and curious, and that's how the dream ended. The abandoned concrete structure represented destruction from a previous war. Interestingly, my enemy was dressed the same as I was, all in black, indicating we were both on a special, undercover mission for our cause. My dark eyeliner represents piercing spiritual insight concerning the enemy who's trying to intimidate me with the threat of pain. Feeling calm and curious rather than afraid represents supernatural faith in Jesus and grace for my mission. Years ago, I comprehended so little about spiritual battles, except that I wanted to avoid them. And although I've grown so much, I'm by no means an expert. These dreams seem to be conveying that I have special equipping and assignments to take on territorial spirits and specialized enemies through spiritual warfare and prayer. I don't choose my assignments, but I'm ready as a soldier when called. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul writes of going places in the Spirit. One listener had a dream in which she believes she actually went somewhere in the Spirit, through a dream, on a covert operation. It was night and she was in a hospital in a foreign country where evil people were doing experiments on children. She was alone on a mission to find a young boy who was being held captive in an awful place. As she was sneaking down a corridor, she realized that no one else could see her. Coming to the room of the little boy on a hospital bed, she waited for the workers to leave and then approached him when the room was empty. She cried and laid her hands on him, praying and releasing the love of Jesus to him. In 2019, I dreamed of being called into military training for 3 days, alerting me that I was being prepared for active duty ahead. I've come to realize it's my job to be watchful and ready, and God's job to position and equip me for the battles I'm called into. This is true for all of us. If we could see fully into the spirit realm, we would have no doubt that the earth is a battlefield and every person has a critical role to play. God says his people perish for lack of knowledge. Let that not be us. Paying attention to what we're dreaming is a powerful way we receive what we need to be ready for what's coming. Just last night while sleeping, I clearly heard the name of a foreign leader and knew I was being called right then to pray for him. I know so little about this man, yet felt impressed with God's love and care for him and an urgency to cover him in prayer. Why would God choose me, on the opposite side of the world, to pray for someone I've never met? I'll likely never know on this earth, but that's part of the mystery I've come to embrace. Why not me? Why not you? Will we be those ready with a listening ear that God can call upon, day or night? Very recently, I dreamed of being on a beach where there was a military tent, and they were doing experiments on the soldiers. Some standing outside of the tent were conflicted about signing up for the experiments. I said, "Don't do it," as if it were a simple choice, but I could tell their military training was keeping them from reasoning for themselves. We saw other soldiers who had accepted the experiments coming out of the tent with their faces melting off. It was awful, but everyone was acting matter-of-factly, as if they had to accept whatever they were told to do. Next, I was running away from the tent toward a huge concrete building nearby. I passed President Trump running in a suit toward the military tent. His face was steady and determined. I had to climb up a hill to get to the concrete building, and it was covered with living organisms. One spelled out coronavirus in orange letters. I didn't want to touch these organisms, but had no choice as this was the only way up that hill. At the top, what had once been a crowded public place was now deserted. Two bad guys were following me, so I quickly slipped into the nearest door of the building. This entire multi-level building was completely abandoned, except for a handful of workers at a Mexican restaurant on the ground floor. Knowing the bad guys were right behind me, I yelled, "Ayúdame!" to get the workers' attention. Then I slipped into another door to hide. I knew the workers were skilled fighters and would easily defeat the bad guys coming after me. The soldiers represent those willing to forsake their divine image out of foolish loyalty to the world. I believe this dream is set in the past based on President Trump running, indicating when he was running for office. The beach, the boundary between land and sea, correlates to the line between stability and chaos. Climbing the hill of living organisms represents biowarfare, of which there were many, coronavirus being the only one identified. The large building is a power structure that the biowarfare was designed to keep people away from. My access attracted enemies who didn't want me to bring the authority of Jesus there. The cooks in the Mexican restaurant were experienced fighters willing to help at a moment's notice. They were preparing or cooking something in an abandoned space without any customers, pointing toward a special purpose God has for the Hispanic church in the post-COVID era of exposure and third-grade awakening spreading through our nation. Many years ago, one listener dreamed of gathering provisions for a 10-day trip that he knew would be perilous. The first part of his challenge was a dangerous, muddy forest, guarded by wolves and a strong military presence. If he managed to get through the forest, he would then scale a vertical granite rock mountain. He says that the 10-day trip correlated to 10 years of intense trials. Ultimately, the mountaintop was a picture of his calling, but the wolves, military, and mud embody all the ways the enemy tried to keep him from getting to the mountain to begin his ascent into the higher things of God. Think of wolves as the intimidation of the enemy that made him feel hunted, surrounded, and threatened with destruction at every turn. The military presence was there to keep him from advancing, and the mud slowed and even halted him at times. This dream defined his season of slow progress and encouraged him to persevere toward his high calling. Intense spiritual opposition can actually be encouraging if we realize that there must be a lot at stake if the enemy is working so hard against us in a particular area. God has given us all access to things on this earth that the enemy is working overtime to keep us from. As children of God, All the promises in His Word are our inheritance. It's wise to ask what's in our hand, and also, what is the enemy trying to keep out of our hand? I've had many tunnel dreams also, and these are fascinating. Years ago, before the exposure of how corrupt our universities had become, I dreamed of being above ground at a university where there was a fun carnival vibe. They were giving away ice cream. There was a movie theater. Everything was free and aimed at keeping everyone distracted by entertainment. Then I was taken below ground, where there were huge and complex networks of concrete tunnels going everywhere. It seemed what I had seen above ground was a facade, and down below, it was all business, with many meetings going on in different places. There was water in all of the passageways, but in some areas, the water had gotten so deep the tunnels were impassable. At one point, I had to go find a doctor for a sick girl that no one was helping, indicating that care for students held zero priority in this space. This dream unveiled that what is seen on the surface of universities is intentionally crafted to conceal what's really going on below. This type of dream is a call to watch and pray, and also ask if there's some level of active involvement beyond prayer that we're called to. Our calling isn't about us. It's about others who will benefit from us doing God's work on earth. In light of this, living below our God-given potential is selfish, not humble, as the enemy will try to deceive us into believing. True humility is coming into agreement with all God is saying and doing, just like Jesus did, and partnering with His grace to accomplish what we otherwise never could. The ripple effects of our faithfulness will go farther than we can imagine, into eternity. Thanks so much for everyone who contributed to today's episode. I love hearing from other dreamers because we all have unique insights and styles of dreaming. If you have a dream to contribute or that you need help interpreting, please reach out to me using the contact button on my website, www.thenightlife-podcast.com. Also, let me know if you have recommendations for future episodes, would like to contribute via audio or video, or are interested in being interviewed on the show. Remember that God chose each of us for the specific time and place in history we find ourselves in. We are perfectly positioned with everything we need through His Spirit to fulfill our divine purpose for such a time as this, like Queen Esther. I think this is why war movies inspire me so much, and why military dreams are some of my favorites. As you fight your good fights this week, take courage that God is there to equip and strengthen you every step of the way. Thanks for listening.